What we just read, you might remember certain parts of if you were in my pre-Passover class about Miriam. Although today we're going to look at it from a different angle. If you have your red books, we are going to begin on page 833 for our study, beginning of chapter 12. But actually, you don't need your books if you don't want them, or any handouts, because we're going to go over this together bit by bit. Today's portion of the portion is about Miriam. It's actually not just about Miriam. It's about the golden trio, I like to call them. Those three siblings of Moses and Aaron and Miriam. And I say Miriam's name last because that's the way that it's often said. But actually, she is the star of this story. Although it might not be a beautiful, happy ending for her, I am afraid to say. Don't worry, she doesn't die. It is a story that highlights Miriam, because there are many people who say we only know about the Song of the Sea, and that was all she did. Well, that's far from the truth. This story begins, chapter 12, verse 1, with Miriam and Aaron speaking out against Moses. They said to the other Israelites, Moses married a Cushite woman. Cushite is nationality, ethnicity, a foreigner, an outsider. And the rabbis debate who this woman might be. But the idea that Moses had a secret wife that the text never mentions anywhere else was hard for people to swallow. So they eventually concluded, at least many of the scholars did, that this wife was none other than Tzipporah, the wife we already knew that he had. Why? Tzipporah, everybody knew Tzipporah. She was part of the community by then. But they claimed that Moses married an outsider. Interestingly, both Miriam and Aaron are mentioned as making this claim, but the verb in Hebrew, vatedaber, is conjugated in the singular, indicating that only one person, either Miriam or Aaron, is talking. The commentators resolve this by saying that Miriam's name came first, and it's conjugated in the feminine, and that while Aaron was behind Miriam and her message, that she was either the one doing all the talking or at least most of it, which becomes important later. For now, though, and this is quite a relatable scenario, I want to ask you this. Regardless of how we feel about Moses' wife, Tzipporah, have any of you had someone in your lifetime that you care about? Maybe a family member, a friend, who has either dated or married somebody that for whatever reason you didn't approve of. You didn't think they were a good match. And if this has happened to someone in your life, did you choose to tell them that you disapproved? And if so, how? Or if you didn't, why not? It's funny, right? It's relatable. I know plenty of people that dated folks I didn't think were a good match. They dated fine people, great people, people that I just thought weren't a good match for my friends. But I didn't always tell them. Did any of you tell them? Anybody want to tell them, but held their tongue?
Yeah, did tell them and it didn't go well.
Oh, it didn't go well, you say. Well, how did you choose to tell them?
Remember for a lifetime by then.
Well, let's not say why you thought they were a bad match, but I am curious, how did you choose to tell them?
Rather directly.
Directly. So you went up to them and you said, so-and-so isn't right for you. Is that what you said? Something like that? Interesting. So you could say, oh. You know, we do often know what's best for our friends and family members more than they know sometimes. Other times, we don't know what's right for them, and they know more than we do. Anybody else? He said that it actually ended well, according to what he thought. Not so well for his friend, because they did break up eventually. He was right. They weren't right for each other. All right, anybody else? Phil.
I seem to recall telling family members, not good for you, actually. Big, elaborate, huge wedding. And they lasted 2 months.
Well, again, there are plenty of times when someone has said to a family member or friend, they're not right for you. Turns out they were great for each other. They lasted happily ever after forever. You were wrong. But many times you were right. Phil says that she told someone, a family member, this person is not right for you. And Phil, you were right. They didn't last 2 months. Incredible. Incredible what we know about our friends and family members that sometimes love has blinded them to. Maybe one more person, if we have anybody.
Just want to make it in bottom line. It's not a good idea
It's not a good idea.
to tell some cases and others that cited. You know, the Yiddish expression. Be good. Right.
Ah,
It alienates you from the person you're. They are going to do what they believe is the right thing. Therefore, was schism.
so what you're saying is they're going to do what they choose no matter what. So whether you're right or you're wrong, all you are accomplishing is putting a schism between you and your friend or family member. And oftentimes that is what ends up happening. Yeah. That is very tactful. You said that you have a friend who is dating someone you don't approve of, and instead of saying he or she is not right or they are not right for you, you said these are your principles, right? Does this person have the same principles? It's a much more tactful way to go about it. And I will say, Gabby, that the way that Aaron and Miriam, or Miriam and Aaron, as it says here, said this was not so tactful. They did not go up to Moses and say, Moses, this woman is not right for you. They didn't even tell Moses. They said it to all the other Israelites. Moses married this Cushite woman. Now, in verse 2, second part, this is what happens. And I think when you hear this verse, it's going to change the context of what we just talked about. It says, Miriam and Aaron then ask, and this time the Hebrew verb is vayamru, plural, meaning now Aaron is joining in with Miriam. Has Hashem only spoken through Moses? Has Hashem not also spoken through us as well? Remember that these three people are siblings. How does this add context to the verse when they say before to the Israelite camp members, our brother married a Cushite woman that has probably been here all along, that you know and love, but we're reminding you she's an outsider. And by the way, God speaks through us too. How does that add context? How do you feel about this? It's important to remember that with these three siblings, Moses is the leader. And God and Moses have a special relationship. And if you use the metaphor that God is the father or the mother to all human beings, and God has a special relationship with Moses, your sibling, and you say, you know, God has the relationship with us too. How are they really feeling about Moses? And how does that shed light on the earlier statement to everybody else that he married someone that was not okay. Does it tell you their true motivations for saying that to the other Israelites?
Envy.
Envy, yes. Envy, probably. What else? Is this really about Moses' wife, or is it about something else? It's about the dynamics. Ruthie, yes, it's the dynamics. This is like a political thriller. They're trying to make Moses appear weak, or at least equal with them, so they can get a bigger piece of the pie. If you've ever watched the show Succession, maybe you know what this is all about, or many shows about political family dramas. In any case, happens all the time today in politics, where somebody wants to unseat somebody else. They look through your emails, your files, everything you've ever said in the newspaper, trying to find a weakness they can use against you. And when the weakness doesn't exist, or when it cannot be found, they either create one that is false, or they take something that is undoubtedly true, and people are okay with it. And they convince them that this thing they were okay with before is actually not so good. Everybody knew Tzipporah, Moses' wife. People loved her. She was Moses' chosen wife. They gave her respect. Now they're saying, wait a minute, no, this is not okay. But he did. He married an outsider. And again, conversion is acceptable in Judaism. Beloved, encouraged. But for Moses, the leader of all of our people, is this the example he wants to set? Well, again, conversion is wonderful. So it's not bad at all. It's beautiful. To poke holes in something that there's no reason to poke holes in. There was nothing wrong with his wife. But you know what? They wanted to start a rumor. They wanted to make him appear weak. Now, how do we feel about Miriam and Aaron now? Conniving, maybe. Gossip mongers. We're going to get to that, the gossipy, mongery stuff. We're going to get to that in a minute. I love that you said that, so thank you. Hold on to that.
Is there also a suggestion here of racism? That Hushim could very well, probably is referring to a black woman, a Nubian woman. These Middle Easterners are not. What do you think? Early racism?
So excellent use of the Hebrew. You're saying that Cushites, according to most scholars, come from Africa, so they are likely to have darker skin. Is that the problem with Zipporah? Well, I think there could be an element to this. The Torah is not free of bias, but if this was a race thing, then, that's usually something you can see. If she had darker skin, people didn't care. And then they say, wait a minute, maybe you should care. You ever read on Twitter things that really seem like they shouldn't be there? Or if you don't have Twitter, maybe you read in the newspaper or on TV, people saying things about those of other races that really, if someone 100 years from now read this statement and didn't know when it was said, they would think it came from 100 years ago. There's no place for this talk in 2022. There wasn't any place for it back then either. But today, it boggles the mind. So you're right. There could be a racial element to this. Thank you for that. Now, this looks like a challenge to Moses' leadership. And though it doesn't excuse Miriam and Aaron's actions, you do kind of feel sorry for them, possibly, for feeling that Moses, their brother, had become so successful that God had a relationship with him that they didn't have. At least for Aaron, he did have something special. He was the high priest. Miriam had nothing. And again, bias. How were women treated back then? Not okay, but that was how it was. God ends up coming down in the form of a cloud and saying to the three siblings, okay, family meeting. Get you to the tent of meeting, and we will talk about what you just said about my guy Moses. God is described in this Torah portion as a father figure a few verses later. So this is like a father dealing with his kids. On the one hand, two of God's children were mean to their sibling. On the other hand, two of those siblings, the ones who were being mean, feel legitimately that their parent has a favorite child and it's not them. God has some work to do to sort this out. But actually, God says, yes, Moses is my favorite. I love all of you kids. Aaron, I love you. Miriam, I love you. But Moses, he's number one. He has a face-to-face relationship with me. And God ends up punishing Miriam for her actions. Why Aaron is not punished the way Miriam is not clear. It does seem that Miriam was the ringleader here. But Aaron did it too. And again, you talk about possible racism. Well, here's possible sexism. Again, God did not write the Torah by many people by humans. In any case, Miriam ended up getting tzara'at, Hebrew for leprosy, for this. And this is when Aaron got down on his knees and he said to Moses, not to God, but to Moses, the person that he and Miriam had wronged, please forgive us for what we have said about you. Please don't let Miriam die for what we did. And he says the famous Hebrew words, El na refana la, please heal her. Variations of this phrase are often used in many Mishaberach prayers.
Aaron, put himself in double jeopardy. Aaron is the fomenter of the golden calf.
Yes.
And then your Aaron is engaged in Moshe Hora, and Aaron comes off scot-free.
Well, yes, Aaron is also possibly guilty of the things that happened at the golden calf debacle. Depending on how you want to read it, he could be partially responsible. And now he did something wrong again. And it's no coincidence that Moses is not allowed to enter the promised land for what he did wrong. Aaron is also not allowed to enter the promised land because of what he did wrong. Miriam eventually dies before she gets there too. What did she do wrong? Well, there are things that she did wrong, like this, but you could argue that maybe it was written this way because of sexual bias. You don't know. What did she do definitively wrong? It's harder to say, but when most people look at this, they say, this is what happens, like you said, when you gossip. Lashon hara is terrible, evil tongue. And we say today that bad things happen to those who gossip. Well, it's taken from the Torah. Miriam, this is what happened to you for gossiping. Now, maybe it was fair, maybe it wasn't fair, but that's how the ancient commentators read it. This is how many people still read it today. Now, Moses actually says, okay, Miriam, I'm going to help you out. And he prays to God to heal her. And God says, you know what? Okay, I'm not going to listen to you, Moses, because you might be my favorite kid, quote unquote, but you know what? I'm the parent here. She's going to be sick for 7 days. After that time, she can be readmitted to camp. And we don't have time for my final question, but I am going to ask it so you can ask yourselves. Using the parent-child analogy to help us, I want to ask you, when you hear that a parent from another family has punished their child in a way that is unfair or for a bad reason, using methods that you don't approve of perhaps, do you judge them silently? Do you speak up? This is not okay for you to do this to your kid? Or do you believe that they have the power to do what they like under their own roof and it's not your business? Maybe you think a little bit of each and there's a line that you have to draw somewhere where eventually you speak up. Well, there is no time to answer this question, but I do want to say that really, God did something that, to me, was not so great here. And I'm not being disrespectful of God because we are allowed to question God. What we are not allowed to do is to claim that we know better. So to say that this doesn't seem right to me is okay. But at the same time, I can also say, God knows more than me. I could be very wrong about this. Maybe it was exactly what needed to happen. We can question. Judaism encourages us to question. But when we see something in the Torah that doesn't seem right to us, ask your questions and then maybe see if you can think of answers. Bias seems to be a part of this story. The moral of the story, don't gossip, remains true. But that doesn't mean it's a perfect story. So however you choose to view this story, thank you for indulging me, for learning, for exploring it with me, and thank you for your lovely, lovely, lovely answers. I hope that if you found this story fascinating, you can be encouraged to learn more about it. There is so many more things that can be said about this story. It is a lovely one in many ways, and an uglier one in other ways. And that's Torah for you, you know? It is what you choose to make of it. But however you choose to make it